Thank you for joining Sports Development Series. We yours truly, Boma, Ekiyor. 2, 1. All right. SportsDev, welcome everyone. Today we have one of our special guests, a friend of mine as well. Mike Pfister is in the building. Mike, welcome, sir. Thank you for coming on. And Mike is, for those of you who chose not to read the introduction, Mike is a former Senior Manager at FIFA for Development. And with the World Cup coming up, he's going to just chat with me the way we typically chat off camera about the World Cup and Qatar and all the blessings and issues and everything. So, Mike, welcome again.
Boma, thank you very much. Very pleased to be here. I think we've been doing this a couple of times, and it's always a great discussion because it's gloves off. Just two old friends talking about the beautiful game, something that has kept us connected over the past decade. So very much looking forward to this talk.
100%. So Mike, let's jump in. The venue for this World Cup, Qatar. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've been seeing a lot of the messages. I mean, how do you host a World Cup without giving people the ability to get drunk? The beer sales are limited. If you do want to go, I think they have a designated area for people to go and drink. Correct me if I'm wrong. My interpretation of the World Cup is it's a global party. It's people from all over the world coming. There's a liberal, open environment. Have fun, watch football, interact. That's what it's about. It doesn't seem like that's the case here. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course, we for those of us who've been to the region, we know it's a different culture, and this would, of course, staging a global event in Qatar would be different than if you host it in Germany. First of all, I think Germany is a country that had is not a new player on the football scene. Qatar in Asia is not either, but on the global football scene, definitely it's definitely a young football nation. Of course, different sort of fandom. At the same time, I think there's a number of things, and we'll talk about some of the critical aspects, of course.
Yeah.
But I want to start with the positives. I mean, first of all, I don't think just because we're English, we're Germans, or we're Nigerians, that we have a special spot on the global football map. We have our history, of course, but you mentioned a global party, so the likes of Qatar should have the rights to of course be part of that party as well and host it. That's for sure. One thing, the other thing, what is a bit more critical is that things that there are certain parts of the I would say the application process for a World Cup that are different now than at a period when Qatar got the rights to host the World Cup. And I think if the standards were applied today, it would have been tougher on the pure technical side of things, which now, of course, include also environmental issues, human rights issues, etc.
Yeah.
So, but for those of us who have been around, also I think the Qatari sort of environment, you notice that the Football World Cup and hosting the Football World Cup has allowed Qatar to progress or to fast forward some reforms that were slow in happening. So, Qatar used the World Cup very cleverly to basically push back on some resistance, also internal resistance to some reforms. So it was the reform-minded part of let's say of the Qatari community greatly benefited from the World Cup and used the World Cup to push through some reforms in an effort to make Qatar a truly global player on many different fronts, not just in sports. But of course, you cannot change a culture where basically, we all know, of course, Islam, doesn't allow the consumption of alcohol, which for me myself, I don't, I wouldn't say that that's the. You started off with, basically saying that a global party should allow people to drink. But I personally, I still think, I mean, if I was ever running an organization like FIFA, I would try and basically get rid of any alcohol sponsors, because it's about sports, it's about a healthy way of life, and at one point you have to draw the line between your commercial interests and what you're all about. And I think in football we still have ways to go when it comes to that, whereas other sports have basically taken a tougher stand on that. What I hope we will see is that, of course, it's a party within its own way. I mean, every host has got its challenges. I mean, I remember in Brazil, 2014, there were social unrests. Before the World Cup, during the World Cup. So, would you say, was it an ideal place to host a World Cup? Maybe not at that time. In South Africa, there were other issues. As well. So I'd say almost each host has got his range of issues. But of course, now in Qatar, you've got a whole bunch which have sort of come together and has really put Qatar in the spotlight. And I would say almost. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to the World Cup to start, so we can actually talk about also football a little bit, because I have to say, even myself, I've been distracted. I'm looking less at the football groups, but at the groups of the World Cup, and I'm reading more about all the things around the World Cup, and this I think much more than it was in the past. So I'm actually looking forward to getting on with the game and starting to see whether this is actually going to be the most beautiful World Cup, not just because it's Qatar, but just because the quality, hopefully improves every 4 years in terms of the actual game.
Yeah. Do you think it's a function of okay, so if you count the last 3 World Cups, right? So we have Qatar right now. We had Brazil. No, sorry, we had Brazil 2014, right? And after Brazil, we had Russia, and then Qatar. And prior to Brazil, it was South Africa, right? Do you think it's a function of the global media when World Cup is being held in a non-Western country? They tend to try to pick up on all the other stories outside of football. So, for instance, in South Africa, they talked about the crime and the transportation not being ready. In Brazil, I remember Dilma Rousseff, she got a lot of heat for the stadiums and, like you said, social unrest. In Russia, there were tons of complaints that came up about going to Russia and whether or not it was ideal. And now in Qatar, we have a lot of these stories coming up. I think there was one country that I think was Australia that said they were considering boycotting the games because of workers' issues and human rights abuses. So do you think when a certain country hosts the World Cup, it becomes a kind of conversation about everything else that people may be concerned about in that country outside of the World Cup, outside of football itself?
I mean, let's remember, Australia was one of the countries that was running against Qatar, right? So obviously now, that's I think there's still some sour grapes there as well. And of course, the US, at the end, it was between the US and Qatar Qatar got the extra votes needed. But I think that's let's put that aside. Let's focus on the question that you asked, whether the Western media would be highly critical of any host which is outside of the traditional sort of hosting hosting community. I think
Yeah.
this reflects a little bit of our Western arrogance. We still I don't know. I mean, we have our principles. I mean, I live in Switzerland. Fantastic country. Education is taken for granted. The fact that although we're there's a war, and I mean, I had a discussion actually yesterday with someone that got a bit heated. I was like, why should my taxpayers' money go into protecting Ukraine? When there's, I say, well, yeah, because I mean, if you don't block an invasion, I mean, the invading power may get a bit too close to you. I mean, you're two borders away from the war. Do you realize that? And apart from that, also, I mean, the global consequences from food crisis, energy crisis, just to mention a few. So I think we sometimes have there's a bias, and there's still the inability, although with digital technology we can of course be connected across. I mean, we're talking, you're in Canada, I'm sitting here in Switzerland. That's the distance is basically non-existent. It's as if you're sitting next to me, like we did some 20 years ago. But I still think mentally, in terms of principles, the gaps are still there, and it's I think the likes of us who are able to see things a bit more globally and will not apply the lens from our own culture, but are able to recognize that there's another lens on the other side, which is as important and, I would say, as pertinent and as should be respected as our own lens. I think we're almost still in the minority, I think. So I mean, of course, I have my views on many things, but I also live in a different context. I mean, that's and I think there is a very strong Western bias, of course. I mean, I come from the field of development, where we're trying very hard that economic development does not mean applying European principles to beneficiaries in developing parts of Africa, for example. But it's about understanding what the issues are and trying to facilitate local solutions. And that's a big step away from what development used to be in the past, where it's about bringing Western technologies, Western ways of doing things into a context which may not fit. And I think when you start talking about football, which is the world's most popular sport, which polarizes like no other sports, even when somebody tells me, "Oh, I don't like football, I don't even watch it," by saying that, the person cares about football. So I was like, "Well, why are you getting so wound up, man?"
Why are you taking it so personal? It's just a game.
Exactly, because he's still sour that he himself, he was a shit player when he was younger. That still bothers him. So that's the power of football. It touches everyone in one way or the other. And I definitely do think there is a strong Western bias, and I would say still an arrogance that Western media dominates, and that would channel a lot of the critiques. Because let's face it, you go to Asia, you go to Africa, you go to even parts of Latin America, you will not feel the same amount of critique towards Qatar. And of course, I sit in Switzerland, and I'm German myself, and I'll be the first to say that we have a certain arrogance when it comes to thinking that our principles are above the others, as right as they may be in a global context. But then let's allow people to talk about it very openly. And if people say, "Look, I also want to host the event that you've hosted," let's see this. Let's embrace it as a chance of getting it right. And the one thing going back to Qatar, the one thing I hope is that the drive for reform. People are saying that, now with the human rights fronts, of course there were some there were some improvements. The kafala system has been abolished on paper, but in practice it's still there. But it's like that with any law. Any law that's been around for for decades, centuries. It will take time for the system, for the law, the new system to gel with the reality. Because it's still the same people at the end of the day that are being governed by this new law. So has to be education, ways of practices. That takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight. So obviously, a movement of eradicating a system that's been in place for so long, that that movement that started 2-3 years ago, will take time. Will take time to gel, but it's a movement in the right direction. And I think it will be also the pulling. In a way, it's an opportunity for the rest of the region, which may be struggling with some of the with some resistance for reform as well. So I generally do see it overall quite positively. Now I'll be the first to tell you that I don't feel the same vibe around the World Cup as if it was held in the traditional European summertime. That's just because, for example, it'd be much more difficult for me to take days off to watch the World Cup, whereas in the past, I would try and schedule my summer vacation around the World Cup so I can watch four games a day. I can't do it this time because it's crunch time. It's crunch time at work. But I will, there's a small time difference issue, but that's something the Americas have been, dealing with every time. A World Cup was held either in Europe, Africa, or Asia. And I remember the 2002 World Cup in Japan and Korea. It was, I mean, you had to skip class, morning class to watch a game, right? If you're sitting in Europe. So generally, I do feel there is, of course, I would, I do feel also that, there's not that same enthusiasm also coming from me as a total football aficionado, because on this World Cup. And I think the fact there's been so much discussion on things, but the actual football side of things has definitely dampened the mood a little bit. That's for sure.
And I kind of want to jump into the football as well, but speaking about that, about talking about other things outside of football, there's been this huge clamor to get Iran banned from the World Cup because of the recent issues in the country. And recently, I saw your former best friend Sepp Blatter come out and champion a ban of Iran, which I thought was interesting. But so it's, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's virtue signaling at this point. Maybe it's you get a large platform when you're able to do certain things, on the eve of the biggest tournament in the world. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I mean, because if it's the worker issues, human rights abuses, my goodness, there's enough to go around on this planet that you can
That's right.
you can champion. Let's start with most of the products we use are made by workers in appalling conditions.
That's right.
But these same people still buy those products. So I don't know. I mean, what do you make of the Iran situation, and especially the former FIFA boss coming out to say that they should be banned from the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure he would speak that openly about it if he was still, of course, running FIFA. Now it's I think also an easy it's an easy thing to say off the cuff. I would be, I mean, like you're right, like you said, of course, the current situation in Iran is extremely is one that has to be watched extremely carefully to see how it unfolds. At the same time, by banning the national team of Iran, are you really setting sending a signal against the government of Iran, or are you or are you actually just hurting the people who maybe in a desperate situation may actually I mean, the one thing that I've always seen in football, having lived in some of the poorest part of the world, during 90 minutes, you provide people a little bit of some joy, some pride, which goes beyond the government. That's it's your national identification, and which overcomes political lines and rivalries. Like during football, yeah, you're all united behind your team, and then afterwards you go back and you argue again. And I think by banning a country like Iran, you would remove that spark for the Iranian population. At least those are into football. And I mean, how much are you going to hurt the government by banning the country? It's a signal that's going to land on deaf ears anyway. So I don't. I see that a bit more differentiated. And like you said, if we're starting to look at the list of things that you could basically use as a reason to ban a certain country from playing, I mean that you'd have an empty World Cup.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's interesting, the entire thing, and a lot of times you try to focus strictly on the game, but just in different circumstances, and not just for football, in a lot of different sports, the social aspects and social issues somehow find their way into it, especially these days where people try to use the fact that this event is happening, a lot of eyes are on this event. They try to use that opportunity to bring forth their agendas or their concern, whatever it may be, for whatever reason. So it's interesting, but this is going to be a special World Cup. But moving into the football side, I don't know if you've been following the different leagues in Europe and what's going on, with different leagues, Champions League, going into this World Cup in November. It's, from my perspective, it seems different.
Mm-hmm.
It seems there's a lot of concern about injuries, more so than if it was being held in the summer. We saw recently Sadio Mane is out, which is a big blow for Senegal. That might really affect their chances of getting past the group stages. What are your thoughts about that? And then after the World Cup, a lot of these guys have to go right back into the league, especially for those countries that don't have a winter break. What do you think? Yeah,
I'm so glad you mentioned this, because when is the African Cup of Nations that's being held in January? Everybody jumps up and down and says it's the worst idea in sporting history, and why should African players leave their top clubs in Europe for a couple of weeks, get hurt on less than optimal pitches, and then come back to the European clubs. Now it's the World Cup, and basically club calendars worldwide have been shifted to make it happen. And any and I think if there's a way, if on the sporting side of things, if there is a critical element that one has to look at, it is exactly precisely that, is that this moving that World Cup to the in order to accommodate it for climatic conditions and make it more make it healthier for players to play in decent temperatures, and not to have air conditioned stadiums with all which is highly unsustainable from an environmental perspective. You actually put all these players at an additional stress and additional risk of injuries. I think that is the biggest, from a sporting perspective. I think that is one of the, if not the biggest element that one has to discuss and take seriously. It puts. I think maybe also that's one of the reasons why. Are you there? I think we got.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I lost you for a quick second, but you're back.
So, and I'm just saying that I think this is the element that one should really discuss in more depth, because I think it also rubs off on other things, such as, I think, my own motivation to follow this World Cup is because we're watching Bundesliga, and then almost a week later, we're we're in the World Cup. And you can see how also the frequency of the games has been squeezed. They started earlier in the summer, and I think the injuries that you see like Sadio Mane's it's probably not a coincidence. It's also because it's already an extremely packed competition calendar for the top games, for the top teams in particular, and now you're pressuring that even more, and that the health of the players still gets, I think, a very minor role in these discussions. I mean, it's people like us who discuss it, but have you seen an article from these Western media, like you said, which focuses on that element in depth with empirical evidence? And none. It's all about the human rights issues, about not creating spaces for enough alcohol. It's not going to be the fan fest because it's in Qatar, blah blah blah. No, but where the real issues are, I think, from a sporting perspective, is exactly that. That it's probably it's putting players under extreme stress. Of course they'll go. I mean, they're players. I mean, remember when we're both sort of athletes at one point. You want to play at all costs. If they ask you to play 4 times a week, you will. And you don't think of you'll go even injured into the game. So that's so it's not up to them to decide, but they're being put, I think, in a very, very difficult, very, very difficult position. And I think that's a big risk factor of this particular World Cup.
Yeah. How much do you think that affects the level of play in the World Cup and the intensity of the competition? Because I was looking at the EPL, for instance. I think they still have their Christmas schedule going on, which is disturbing, right? Because you finish the World Cup and then boom, you're right back during the holidays playing these matches. I think they play Boxing Day, then they play New Year's.
Exactly.
But in the World Cup, how much do you think this affects? Are we going to see a lower level of play that we typically are used to? I mean,
challenge me, Boma, on that one. But I would actually think, funnily enough, the quality may actually be better, because usually when it's held in the summer, it's at the end, of a long season. It's shortly after the Champions League final. So, for example, the German national team, if Bayern Munich was playing the final, half of the team would have just come out of a super long season, whereas now it's half time. So maybe they might actually even be fresher. I find with what may be what is the problem is that they've intensified the number of games, and that going into the World Cup, the risk of injuries might be higher. But I think the quality of the game may actually be better, because you're not at the end of a super long season. You're halfway. That's so I think I'll be more measured. I'll be more measured on that front. But I generally do think, and that is a trend that both FIFA and other regional confederations have to get under control. Is this explosions of competitions, explosion of games, and not only does it. We all know the motivation is first and foremost commercial. But then players are seeing really as gladiators. And basically, let's pay them even more, so they go even faster, they train harder at our pleasure as consumers. So you come home after a long day of work, you open up your beer, you get fatter, while the super fit guy, gets paid more money for your own pleasure. And there seems to be no limit to that. And that's they're just trying to see, where can I fit? Where's a free couple of days where you can fit again another competition, rebrand it again, add more teams to it, make it explode even further. Whereas on the sidelines, doctors have been ringing the alarm bells for years, and they're not being heard at all in these discussions. And I think, particularly when it comes to the amount of football games, I think less is more. I mean, I'll give you also an example. When you look at Champions League, I mean, I remember when the first rounds of the games were already the Bayern Munich versus Ajax Amsterdam versus Paris Saint-Germain. The Champions League was on from day one. Now, Charlie, you have to wait until until the semifinals, until you switch on the TV and watch it, because that's when it becomes really, really spicy and really important. So I feel like by adding too many teams, too many games, you're actually watering down the quality. Particularly for those who are really big fans of the game. You also know that football fans are it's not a homogeneous group. There are others who will watch no matter what game their team plays, so they're going to follow, and there's others who will try and basically get their time. They'll spare that time for a good game, and not just for any game. So
Yeah.
I do think less is more, and we really have to start focusing on the quality more than the quantity of games. And I think that is a discussion which is very unbalanced and has been unbalanced for I'd say 5-6 years already.
So are you a fan of the increase in the number of teams after this World Cup?
I mean, to be honest with you, I am very much looking forward to the United World Cup, as it's called, just because it's going to be a massive show, and if there's just a set of countries that can host such a massive event, it would be those three. So it's really, I think that would be a fantastic event. Whether it's the formula for every single World Cup going forward, you're going to have 48 teams. I'm a bit more skeptical. That's I have to say. I mean, even when there were less teams in the World Cup, the quality wasn't always that great. I remember the Italy World Cup is one of those at technical level. Other people say it was quite low in terms of quality, in terms of, to follow it. So let's see. I'm open to the idea. See what it does, but I do fear that again you have to wait until quarterfinals until most people start switching on their TVs to then say, okay, now the World Cup has started. And if that is the reaction, then it was definitely a mistake.
Yeah, and you're echoing. Our co-host is not here today, but Mike, who's your namesake, his name is also Mike, who's always here. That's one of his key points he makes is
people of the game, and people would have clearly identified the value added from a development perspective, from a technical perspective of basically increasing the number to 48 teams, and then of course that there are commercial benefits and political benefits as well. But now I think it's been sort of, I think that order has been reversed. First it was look, we need to make more money. Let's get more teams in. Let's get more teams into the arena. More teams means more federations who think they have a chance of qualifying for the World Cup. So we will support, of course, the FIFA politically. Because we get a chance of being on the stage. There's going to be more money for everybody, etc. I think that was the prime motivation. Whether now I am at the same time I am a strong believer that if your country participates in the World Cup, it gives football a boost in your country, even if it's temporary. But for that moment, kids go crazy. About football, there is an increased hype around the game, and hopefully in participation in the game as well. So I do think there is a link there, of course, and of course that the federation that participates gets more money that it can invest into football development. Yes, these are all valid arguments, but these should have presented first and foremost as the argument for increasing the number of teams. And I think that was if that did happen, it was probably not communicated enough around it, and I think these results, this evidence, and these empirics were not presented in a manner that satisfies, I think, the football aficionados like you and me. So I think the next one, the United World Cup, will be a big show. Whether it's the model going forward and every single World Cup has to be of that size, I think this it shouldn't be a fixed model. I think we should reevaluate afterwards and see whether we can make it more manageable. Because now what that means now is that it's always going to be a mega event. Going forward with sustainability issues, teams having to travel, across continents to play games, etc. While at the same time we're trying to fight climate change, right? So these are all elements that have to be considered.
No, it's a really good point, and like you said, I'm curious to see how that whole change plays out. The competition part is just one aspect, like you mentioned, that we'll look at, but then there are a lot of different aspects that come into play, including the qualification series.
That's right.
And I don't in a country like in a continent like South America, where you already have a very limited number of countries, and they play kind of like a round robin. If you're increasing the slots, then that competition we typically saw, doesn't it gets watered down. It's not as competitive to. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to it, but the great minds at FIFA seem to know or think that this is a good thing. But the one thing you spoke about is development, and this is something that you and I care about, and you've also worked intimately on when you were part of that organization. As this World Cup draws near, we all know that teams get financial compensation from FIFA for qualification. And when that financial compensation comes through, are there conditions attached to it for development? Or is it entirely up to the federation to decide whether or not they decide to use a certain amount? How does that whole process work out?
I mean, when you put aside now the financial volumes, I've been out of the organization for a while, so I'm not sure what that is now that each team receives. But it was around 5-6 million per participating team. I think already back in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the rationale was that by participating in a World Cup, your financials are going to be stretched. You're going to have to organize camps. You're going to have to, professionalize even further. So that is why you get compensated for it. And I think that's only fair that you're going to be you get compensated so that you're not going to get stressed financially. And I mean, of course, countries like I would say Germany don't need it, but if you're even Cameroun, if you qualify, you'll need certain financial help to basically come as prepared as any other team. So I think that was the logic. Now there's no specific conditions that are attached to that compensation. There's definitely no development because the motivation is different. It's not to promote development. It's to help you prepare for the World Cup. Right. That was that's the rationale for that money. Now there are ample other opportunities to boost development, and I think that's where we can have a long discussion of whether that money that FIFA gives to its member associations for development for the forward program, is that enough money? Does that program have the necessary oversight, the capacity from a management perspective to make sure the money does go into development? I think this is where I would have question marks. So it's less about the money that they get to be participating in the World Cup. It's more generally whether the football development system as such coming out of FIFA is equipped so that development returns are actually met.
Okay, so and I see your point. So that amount of money is geared towards helping them prepare and all the logistics and expenses that they would typically not incur had they not qualified. They have to incur now. So in that same regard, does that apply to the bonuses? We know about this. You and I know about this very well. And the issues around bonuses. is that money, because federations get that money without calling out any federation. Some federations get that money, but then players complain about not getting the bonuses. Is the understanding that FIFA has given that money for logistics, but yes, at the same time to also cover whatever bonuses are paid? Because the bonuses are determined by the federation, right? How much a
Exactly.
player.
No,
Yeah,
it's There's no. It doesn't mean because you qualify that you should get a bonus.
sure.
That's not. That's at the discretion of the federation to do so. And I think, particularly, in the context that you and I know very well, the
Yeah,
issue of bonuses come up because there is this frustration that the federation gets the money, doesn't do enough with the money. That instead of going to the team's preparation, it goes into the pockets of officials. So the players, feel that this is a moment to vent and to say, and to actually claim for higher bonuses, or to have the bonuses, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who qualify the team. So that's so I get that, and I do think if the federations were more professional,
yeah,
if the benefits, the development benefits from the work of the federations are clear, there would be less pressure on the bonuses, because most today, players in the Ghanaian national team, Cameroonian national team. They're making so much money already. They're all playing in top leagues.
yeah,
That little extra bonus from participating in the World Cup is not going to make a huge difference. It
yeah.
was. I think it was slightly different in '94, '98, 2002, but then, or I would say 2006 for the likes of Togo, because we all know at that time Togo had they had one player who played in the English Premier League, Emmanuel Adebayor, and the others
Adebayo,
played,
yeah,
the others played in some played also in decent leagues, but then there was a big bunch of them that played in amateur leagues as well. And for them, it was the one opportunity to actually see a bit of money, knowing very well that the Togolese Federation at that time was anything but professional. So I think,
I remember that World Cup very well. It's interesting because I can just tell you, like, having talked to different people from certain federations, you hear of um federation presidents using that allocation money to strengthen their political standing within the country by flying people out to the World Cup, putting them in five-star hotels, taking care of family and friends, fulfilling several calls from politicians, business interests, whatever the case may be, they use that money to take care of all those things. Um, yes, they allocate a little bit of money for logistics and all that, but they're like, okay, this is an opportunity. Let's use it to try to bolster our standing, so that way we can get reelected and continue to keep this seat. As a matter of fact, I know from certain sources that during federation elections, it's one of the promises made to some of the people that cast their ballots for who becomes the next federation president. Um, but then, like you said about the case of Togo, with those players that play in amateur leagues, who are looking forward to some level of compensation and don't get it. There are a couple of questions that come to my mind. One is, okay, let's assume that you're entitled to some level of compensation for your time in the World Cup. How do we calculate that level of compensation? What standard are we using to determine how much you should get paid? Um, and my guess is you're getting paid per game, or you're getting paid per hours trained, including time in the game. What are your thoughts about that? I've never really seen anyone make a compelling argument to say, okay, you're Togo. The average salary or per hour rate in Togo, are you using that rate? Because if that is the rate, most of these players won't even show up. Or are you using some international rate to determine what they would get paid? Or are you using what they typically would earn at their clubs? Because if you did use that, the players like Adebayor, you won't be able to afford them. What are your thoughts about that?
yeah.
Yeah,
No, but I think there's that goes back to a sort of solidarity principle that FIFA's had for a long time when it came to financial compensation. So, for example, the amount of money that each federation gets through FIFA Forward, so what used to be called like the goal programs and the financial assistance programs of FIFA, which have been sort of repackaged and rebranded as FIFA Forward under Infantino. It's the same for every single federation. So Montserrat gets as much as China, which gets as much as Cameroon, gets as much as Switzerland. Obviously, that makes no sense at all, but that's how it's always been. It's not. I mean, what? And this goes back to what I said: the capacity to do proper development in these organizations they haven't really invested in that capacity, because then such a system wouldn't be around, because then there'll be a targeted system based on the country's needs, based on the country's circumstances. I mean, Montserrat has no place to fit in another stadium right now. Yeah, yet they're getting money for infrastructure. You know, and I remember in Macau, for example, the problem was, look, we don't need another pitch. We don't have any space in Macau for another pitch. We have to think of maybe having them on rooftops and so don't give us money for football pitches. Give us money for something else. But these discussions and that thought process I think, is actually lacking in the like of FIFA development programs, for sure. And that goes back to your same question. Of course, I do think that there should be a much more evidence-based contextualization standards of how much countries do get, be it through the football, the World Cup compensation, or at least in terms of the development programs. Or at least you should the money should go to the regional confederations, and the regional confederation then decide which country gets what, and and I think it goes back also to a problem which has been inherited which has been around in FIFA too. There's just way too much money in football. I mean, and also it comes with the image. People want to be they want to sit on the FIFA Council, because it's you're getting top class flight tickets. If you're going to stay at 5-star hotels, you're getting a lot of money to be sitting on the FIFA Council. I mean, you look at the International Olympic Committee, which has its own issues, but if you go to Olympics, the big shots of the IOC and the members, they walk around in polo shirts. They get transported in normal buses, not in limousines. It's a much more down to earth. It's about the sports first. I mean, of course, that the principle of Olympicism is it's amateur sports. It's about participating in sports. And FIFA has been football has been very different like that. It's always been about the money. It's very pompous. It's you've got football officials sitting on boardrooms and in suits and ties. I mean, come on, what is this? We're talking sports here. And I think that is hopefully one day there'll be a leadership that's going to eradicate all that. I think that system and that approach to football, and bring it back to sports, and then even development money is not going to be politicized anymore. You're going to move away from what you call solidarity principle, which sounds, of course, like the right thing to do, but it's nonsense if China gets as much money as Montserrat, as much money than South Africa, when the needs are completely different.
Yeah. 100%. And the thing is, for the player salaries in a World Cup, right? Do you think FIFA should create a standard? Because there seems to be this issue, right? So, for instance, in Brazil, the Ghanaian players threatened to sit out games because they weren't compensated. How do they determine how much the player should get paid? I haven't seen anything. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I haven't seen that says,
it's at the discretion of the federations again, and there's also this. I mean, in principle, you shouldn't get paid for playing for your national team. It should be an honor to
Correct.
do so. And unfortunately, because there's so much money around, they know that the officials are getting tons of money through whatever sort of bonuses and compensation that should go into the team, so that the team doesn't, doesn't stay in crappy hotels and stuff. But the fact that it is not happening, of course, enrages players, particularly the ones that are being treated unfairly. You're not going to have that discussion in Germany, I can tell you that. First of all, the players know that they're making enough money. Of course, they're going to get a bonus if they make it to the quarterfinals, semifinals. It's a reward for their performance, but it's not a salary. They're making enough money in the clubs. But you also do know that, most of the money that the German Football Federation puts into football actually lands in the development of the game and not in the pockets of officials. And unfortunately, in the context that you and I know very well, that doesn't always happen, and you don't see the development returns. That the money, until it reaches the outskirts of Kano for a football pitch, it will have gone through a number of pockets, and at the end, a tsunami ends up into one drop for football development to where it's actually most needed. And I think that is that is the problem. And at the same time, also, that is a topic that has been, I think, a little bit abused because it's misunderstood. That is, particularly when it also comes to the rewards for women's football. To say, men players have higher salaries for playing the national team than the women counterparts.
Women.
Well, but there's no salary for playing in the national team. No, there's no salary. And that's and it's up to the federation to make sure that the benefits to support women's football are the same. That you invest equally, if not more, because you want to make up a gap. So it's about what you put in the structure, what opportunities you provide for girls to participate and are they the same as for men? I think that is the issue. And once you have that equity, then the financial compensation is going to be more equal as well. I mean, you see that in sports where I think the popularity of the women's game is basically equal to the one. Look at tennis. Women's tennis and men's tennis. That's they both enjoy a lot of popularity. And this is also reflected in the compensation. So I think the discussion is a bit again, it's politicized and it is a bit misled. Also because a lot of people don't understand the system. That's
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever see a day where not World Cup money, but development money that's given to FIFA member states has stronger oversight?
I think and there I would like to take the Olympic Solidarity Program as an example. It's so much more professionally organized and structured than let's say FIFA development programs. It's really is a lot of investment in national Olympic committees, in the way the development money is spent, the monitoring, I still I honestly do believe that there is a lack of understanding of the importance of monitoring results in the global football system, and particularly through FIFA. And why I say that is because they would see we have to check results because we're going to be audited financially. Yeah, sure, but that for me that's just normal that you're going to be audited. But what you want to know is whether your money has reached a destination, what impact it has had, and there's none. That work doesn't take place because the focus is on making sure the money gets there, and I do think that the structures, financial oversight wise, have improved for sure. This they are 100%. Also because of the risks of having a negative audit, the reputational risks are massive. So there, yes, I think on the financial aspects, yes. In terms of the technical development return side of things, there is so much more work to be done. Are we going to see? Are we going to see a day? That all depends. Who's going to be the next FIFA president? What sort of people is he going to bring? I'm convinced, Boma, if you know, for example, are sitting in a certain position that I know instead of some other person right there, different questions would be asked because your interests are not political. You're just happy with with your salary. You're very proud to be working for FIFA. Now let's focus on making sure that we bring development to the federations that most need it. And that also who we influence. I mean, let's face it. Their FIFA's got a lot of power to influence who sits on the various on the leadership of the various federations. Yeah, sometimes it cannot, yes, but it has its ways of influencing. And if that influence is not political, but is actually based on development, development potential, and let's say the political agendas and platforms, the programs that candidates bring forward, if that's the focus and not political alliances, then you're actually talking about changing the system. Because right now the system is, I'm going to support the president of this and this federation because that president is going to support me in my re-election. Not at all. In terms of what are your development objectives for your federation, for your provinces, for your girls, for your boys, that discussion does not take place. That is the sad truth.
And what you said about political alliances, you look at a continent like Africa, right? 54, 55 countries. That's a huge voting bloc for whoever's campaigning to become FIFA president. And if an oversight is created, it might create a lot of unhappiness with some federations on that continent, which may cost a lot of votes. So that may be the reason why they're dragging their feet on. What do you think about that?
But there I have to say, it doesn't have to be like that. And there, excuse me if I'll be very, very critical of the current FIFA leadership. When the current FIFA president became president in 2016, he had honestly carte blanche to do whatever he wanted or whatever he would have considered necessary to clean up, right? And when I say clean up, like I said, I think in terms of compliance, in terms of financial management, things have improved. Yes, I definitely do think so. But that's just one element. There's so much more. And with that money that FIFA has, that the football system generates, it's incredible what you could do. And there, FIFA is underperforming. The regional confederations are underperforming because there is this the allegiances and the alliances are political. They're not based on, and this is something that he could have killed because the world was sick with FIFA in 2015, 2016. So he could have really overhauled the whole system, but he didn't do that. So it was a massive missed opportunity. And now I don't think that opportunity is going to come up. So unless there's going to be another scandal, another explosion on the governance front, which I'm not sure is going. I'm not sure it's going to happen. So I think that was the moment to really completely revamp the system. Having said that, there are federations. There are some confederations which are doing a great job. I mean, most South American federation are doing a great job. There's a number of I think federations in Asia, for example, with very limited means, are doing fantastic things. So that's so there are pockets, there. But I mean, we could do so much more, and it starts from it starts at the top.
No, facts. Before we go quick, so let's get back to the football. Who are you rooting for? Ghana, Germany, or Switzerland?
I will. You know what? I just saw that 2 days ago, Germany, our coach Hansi Flick made the World Cup squad public. I am really impressed with the choices he made. They were tough choices, and he managed to strike a balance which I think we haven't seen in a long time.
Really, I haven't seen the list. Who did he
For
is
example,
Sane is on there?
Sane is on there. We know that whenever Germany won the World Cup, we had a block striker up front, a hardcore number 9 that doesn't necessarily play for 90 minutes, but when things are rough, he comes in, makes a difference. In 2014, it was Miroslav Klose.
Klose, yeah.
Right? And for years, we were struggling to have such a... Of course, the system was different, right? So yeah, you had Werner, you had Havertz. These are all strikers, but they're not the block in front, the type of the Yakini type. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And it's rare to have that player. We actually in the last couple of months have had a blessing because there's a guy named Füllkrug who plays for Werder Bremen. He's leading the scoring list right now in the Bundesliga. For years, the guy was struggling with injuries and never was able to play to his full potential. This is the first time he's been injury-free for months, and he's outperforming against all bets. But he's never played for the national team, and we're all praying, that he gets a chance. And now he's in the team, and he's wearing number 9, so that is great. Mukoko from Dortmund, 17 years old. People would say,
I know him. Yeah, he's good. I like him. Yeah.
Should we take Mukoko? Should we take Füllkrug? Different players. What did he do? He find a way that he can bring both.
Both. Yeah.
And honestly, I think this is. So I'm actually really excited. Also, he's bringing Götze. And I tell you what, you can say, okay, Götze hasn't played at a top level for many years. Only recently, when he went to Eindhoven, he started playing again. Now he went back to Frankfurt, and honestly, he's doing magic with Frankfurt. He's the Götze that he was in 2014 with more experience. And let me tell you, if the guy who was brought on and scored the goal of the final of the World Cup to make Germany a world champion, when he steps onto the pitch, people remember that. So that's going to have an impact. So the fact that he managed a way to bring those 3 guys in, against different odds and resistances, for me is extremely refreshing. I'm hyped. And I think we're going to see a new face of Germany, a good face. Whether we win the World Cup, I don't know, but it's going to be a good team. It's going to play good football. Something maybe
is Rudiger on there?
Sorry?
Rudiger is there, right?
I'm not sure, actually.
I hope they put Rudiger on that. I love that guy.
He must be. He has he must be. Who is not there? Hummels. Hummels was hoping.
Hummels not there?
Yeah, Hummels was hoping that he makes it. But for me, it was those 3 new elements that are going to make. One is a flash from the past, and the other one, I think, just 2 fresh elements. They can make a huge difference. As you know, when you have 11 players, 3 players make a huge difference. Then, of course, I'm very curious to see. I was really rooting for Senegal, just because it's a fantastic generation right now.
It is.
Yeah. It is. Sadio Mane not being there, or maybe I think he's on the list, but his injury is a real blow. Hopefully, I don't know whether he's going to come back. Let's hope. Not just because I want Senegal to win over Ghana or whatever. No, but just because he's just a fantastic player and he deserves to be. He deserves to represent the African continent on the world stage. That is. Then we see, Ghana. I've got a soft spot for Ghana, so I'm always going to root for Ghana. They have an extremely tough group, with Portugal, Uruguay, South Korea. That's tough. How about yourself, though?
Ghana knocked us out. So, but the Nigerians, we have a love-hate relationship with Ghana. We hate them on the continent, but we love them on the international stage. So,
we must support them.
Yeah, we support them. I'm excited about Cameroon. Because did you see how they qualified with Algeria? If I bet on that game, I'd have lost all my money, because Cameroon they're this enigma. You can't quite understand them. You can't quite predict them. you know they have the talent, but you also know they have a history of underachieving. Fantastic players, fantastic players. You know, very good athletes. What they did to qualify was highly impressive. To beat an Algerian team in Algeria in a stadium they had never lost in for a very long time. A very good Algerian team with Riyad Mahrez, and that was very impressive. So I'm excited about them, but I'm cautiously excited because I know Cameroon.
No.
They have a good goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Fantastic midfield. You know,
And Choupo-Moting, he's on fire right now.
he's on fire. He's playing at the top level. Look,
right.
I'm excited about them. I'm excited about them.
And you know, for me, honestly, Samuel Eto'o, Rigobert Song, for me, they were like family. You know, some time back, and and they still are. I hope, I wish them all the best, the big successes. Rigobert Song is under the heat. But I know he is in it with blood, heart, and soul. You know, so is of course Samuel Eto'o. You know, being this young former player who got to be the president of the federation. I think that alone deserves, you know, some blessing from above to you know, so they make it to the next round.
Yeah, I'm excited about them, and like you said earlier, we know Etofis is not doing this because he's trying to make money from the federation. Yeah. We know that.
Yeah.
And we know his passion. We know the kind of personality he has. So it's exciting. I'm excited for them. I'm excited for Cameroon. And if they show up and they have this midfielder that plays for Napoli, he's amazing. Nguissa.
Yeah.
Oh man, he's a fantastic player. So I'm look, I'm excited, but I know Cameroon. They've broken my heart so many times. that part of me is like, okay, listen, just control your excitement a little bit and just let's see what happens. So yeah, that's what it is. But Mike, listen, thank you so much, brother. You and I, we could talk for 5 hours nonstop.
Definitely.
You know, I'll be sending you messages during the World Cup. As we go through, I also like to watch Germany just because of, you know, how they play. Their football is always very interesting to watch, very efficient, and the thing is, I think they have a chip on their shoulder because they didn't have a good outing last time. So
we're gonna make it better. We have it's payback time, and we're hot. Well, Boma, I really appreciate you know, this discussion, and let's keep it rolling, eh? And,
yes, sir.
And Canada, sir. I'm looking forward to Canada as well, but that's for that's for a different discussion.
Yeah, that's a totally different discussion. If they could get past Croatia, I'm not giving them any chance against Belgium. But if they can get past Croatia, which maybe, I don't know if that's possible, because Croatian players are a little older, but they're still very good. You know, So I don't know. We'll see. All right, brother.
All right, my brother. You take care, huh?
Take care.
All right.